physics. Kitchen luck, only in 17th year I started a new project. It was the study Spin-Fermion concept of superconductivity in direction of London penetration depth. After 3 years, I submitted my PhD thesis titled London penetration depth in an ensemble of spin-Fermion quasi-particles in cuprate high-temperature superconductors. I try to be clear and interesting you. So let's go. The central problem of the theory of high-temperature superconductivity is associated, as you know, with need to correctly take into account strong electron correlations. In cuprates, it's a class of compounds with Cooper-oxygen plates. In undoped cuprates, Cooper ion are in 3d9 configurations, and oxygen ions has a completely filled 2p shell. The strong column repulsion of two holes on the copper ions leads to the fact that upon doping, hole carriers appear not on Cooper but on oxygen ions, and so we have a strong coupling between charge and spin degrees of freedom. Thus, correlations are taken into account almost exactly within the Spin-Fermion model, which arise from the three-band PD model, about which Professor Brown told us. So, yes. Transition to the effective Spin-Fermion model from the PD model is accompaniment by the transformation by the hybridization effects into the into the effective interactions showed on the figure 1 in the structure of cuprum oxygen plants. So in this case, the parameter J of the Spin-Fermion interactions turn out to be the largest parameter of the model. Its larger value formed the basis of the concept of a spin-Fermion quasiparticle and the Cooper pair of such quasiparticles, induced by the exchange between two localized spins, played as a mechanism of superconductivity, high-temperature superconductivity of cuprates. So, as you know, transition to the state of superconductivity means a drop to zero of electrical resistance with the simultaneous displacement of the magnetic field from the superconductor volume. That is Meissner effect. And the small distance over which the magnetic field still penetrates to the superconductors is called London penetration depth. Since London penetration depth in cuprates is many times bigger than the Huygens length, equation of London can be used. And this equation is satisfied with good accuracy. According to these equations, the ratio between superconducting currents or superfluid density and the vector potential is taken into account in the local approximation and is linear. In this case, the coefficient of proportionality is determined by the square of the London penetration depth. So the task is to calculate this coefficient. The ratio between superfluid density and vector potential can be obtained by varying the Hamiltonian or the Spin-Fermion model in the field of vector potential. So, using the Zwanzig-Marie projection technique, we find a consistent solution of the system of equations to determine the needed correlation function. The figure on the left shows the result of these calculations of London penetration depth with the spin-Poisson concept with 17% of hole doping, which corresponds to the experimental data shown on the right. We can see that the inflection point is quite clearly observed on theoretical temperature depends. In some cuprates, such inflection point is observed experimentally, like this experimental. However, as you see, the theoretical curve exceeds the experimental data on the critical temperature about 3 times. We found a solution to this problem by taking into account column repulsion, column interaction between holes on the oxygen ions. So, but what is the reason of the inflection point? To find out this reason for the appearance of inflection point, we need to analytically calculate the derivative of the expression for the supercurrent over the field and determine the term that leads to this effect. Since the expression for the supercurrent obtained with the projection technique is fairly complicated, the number of terms arising after taking the derivative is large. However, as numerical analysis shows, only one of them leads to a feature that manifests itself as inflection point. This can be seen on this figure 1. So it's a pink dashed curve. Green dashed curve shows us all other contributions, and the black solid curve shows the sum of green and pink curves. And for comparison with the black curve, there is symbolic curve. Is the same experimental data at LSCO at the same doping value 17%. So the term determine the pink curve on figure 1 has the derivative of the Fermi function. The presence of the derivative of the Fermi functions means that the main contribution to these integrals comes from region of the intersection points, Fermi surface, and nodal line. These two regions are shown in the first quadrant of the Brilliant zone. It is important that the Fermi velocity, each of which regions has different direction. Red on the right, left on the left, blue on the left. So, therefore, this gives the opposite contribution to the pink curve on the figure 1, as you see on the figure 3, by the red and blue lines, respectively. As a result of the competition between the contribution from these two regions, an inflection points arise on the final dependence and explain this. Yes. The existence of the inflection point in the temperature depends of the inverse square of the London penetration depth is due to the feature of the Fermi spin-Polaron excitations spectrum, and therefore can work as manifestation of the spin-Polaron nature of Fermi quasi-particles in cuprates high-temperature superconductors. So it was my short explanation about my dissertation. That's it. If you have any questions, please ask me.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, okay. So did you get those? How did you get those parameters? Did you check against the experiments, or you said that there are many parameters, right? Six parameters or something.
Yes. Yes, we have many parameters, but all of them we can find from base model 3-band PD model. And these parameters, I mean for 3-band PD model, was found from experimental data. And in this theory, we have only one setting parameter is Tunneling integral TPP. All the parameters we calculate from parameters 3-band PD model. So that's it.
This is exactly the Pavel was talking about the D and P here. Just to explain a little bit, D is a D orbitals and P oxygen P, right? And
right.
Basically, we just assume that you have a D and another D higher. I mean the DD transition, but then there is a large U you, to me, very largest here, right? To make sure that it's mostly occupied, and so this is the Hubbard model, right?
Not Hubbard. No, it's
different. Oh, also
Hubbard. It's a very easy model. This is a 3-band model.
I see. Spin-Fermion model. Oh, I see.
It's a 3-band model, but Spin-Fermion model is effective model which arises from 3-band model in the regime of strong electron correlations. But
so the TPP is the interaction between oxygen, right? Basically.
Right.
Because P is from oxygen, so oxygen to oxygen. So that's you included here, right? So the more interacting parameter is the more sophisticated, and so I couldn't really get your model can predict the inflection point. Could you go back and tell me how your model explains the inflection points?
So this model, when we calculate spectrum, we have on the we have whole pocket on the brilliant zone like this. So usually, and in experimental data, we can see these parts of brilliant zone because this part usually so we use midfield theory, and we cannot include quantum correlations, and so quantum correlations they let's see
is that because of
so quantum correlations I can just say so they kill that region in the brilliant zone. So but anyway we have sort of things in the experimental data which aim us that this term can be so, and this model when we calculate spectrum have these two regions, and so we have this, and because we can explain the inflection point in the theoretical, which we explain in theoretical or in experimental data, like this.
So you calculate Fermi velocity, right? figure 2, right? You use
Right.
right?
Right.
That will tells you the related with the inflection, I guess. Okay, so any other questions?
Maybe some question to clarify what I see. In the middle graph, you show a velocity of, let's say, spin up, spin down electrons, roughly speaking, right?
No.
No, that's a spin polaron quasi-particle. So that means that you have, let's say, uncompensated spin quasi-particle within the Cooper pairs, right? Is that correct?
Right? Correct.
Yeah, so they move in opposite directions. Of course, you cannot tell whether they spin up, spin down, because both situations are symmetric. One may be up, down, or maybe the other way around. But electrons in Cooper pairs, they move in opposite directions, right? One can tell that. Well, this is in fact a quite interesting picture, because if you consider chain of localized orbitals, each localized orbital occupied with one electron only, and all that is coupled in some kind of that will be not a gas, of course, but because they are localized, some kind of crystalline lattice. And then what may happen, that electrons hop from one node of this lattice to another, such that at some point they create pairs of electrons sitting in one localized orbital, and so on. So they just move back and forth, and this motion is imposed by the vibrations of the lattice. So if we have symmetric lattice, totally symmetric, then all localized states are singly occupied. Once we start displacing atoms from their equilibrium position due to nuclear vibrations, then some of the electrons may hop to these localized orbitals, and in this way they may propagate through the lattice without even experiencing any resistance from lattice vibrations. So they kind of hop in. All right.
So what is a S-P?
Okay.
Is that S from S-P in your description?
Spin polaron. Spin
polaron. Spin polaron. Okay. So these spins are mostly oxygen side, right?
Yes.
And so when it hops, usually it oxygen to oxygen hopping, right? Is that something that I can imagine?
No, this is the main here. It's Spin-Fermion interactions, like this. When we have the hole which hope to Cooper has reverse spin, and then hope back to oxygen. And these interactions is the largest in these systems. And these interactions is the base of spin polaron concept, the base of spin polaron quasi-particles.
So the electrons move back and forth between oxygen and the copper, right? Most of the right?
Right.
Then it hops to the copper to copper sometimes, but mostly the copper to oxygen. Is that right?
No. Copper to copper. You mean this interaction?
Yeah.
It's so yes, it's interaction between localized spin, and these interactions can be I have to say that these interactions we explain in we receive in the first of order perturbation theory, and it means that interaction between localized spin happens with carrier electrons. So by the holes like this, but it's looks like this.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So maybe many of our students are from. Oh, you have a cat. Are the cats also coming to Korea?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
So thank you very much for your attention, and a little bit